I am so sorry, y'all, but we are in the cringiest timeline. I want to take a little time and talk about some of the things I've learned over the last couple of days about Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, and incel brain rot meme subculture online. Full disclosure, this is a subject I knew virtually nothing about until 48 hours ago. So I want to talk about what I know, and then I want to share a number of other creators who actually have expertise and good insight on this issue. And then I want to talk about some questions that I have, because for me, I wish that I didn't have to spend time learning about this. There are so many other things I would rather be doing than spending my life hours and brain space on the violent rhetoric, subculture, memes, lingo of 4chan incel guys. But this is where we are now in the United States of America in 2025. I think historians will look back and examine this period in history and be like, what the fuck? How fucking cringy was the United States in 2025. Yeah, we knew it was. Right now, as we're living through it, we know how cringy it is. And I think in the coming days, more and more Americans are going to realize, like, what the hell? So I don't know very much about this subject at all, like a tiny smidge, which is why I want to direct you to other folks. But I think it's important that we learn together. It's important to understand, because we have to live with the consequences of this conflict on the far right. And in particular, the way that MAGA politicians, from, Utah Governor Cox to Donald Trump to Nancy Mace, are trying to use this scenario to falsely, wrongly whip up this kind of like political civil war between MAGA, the MAGA sphere, and anybody else to the left of them, centrist, liberals, leftists. This is a really dangerous and anxiety-fraught period in our history. Politicians are inciting political violence. We are seeing very dangerous rhetoric that puts people's lives in jeopardy being spewed, from podiums and news conferences and interviews. And a lot of it is allowed to perpetuate because we don't understand the context. We don't understand the subculture where much of this is coming from. And so that empowers MAGA to spin it in a way that fits their narrative. And actually, I don't even know if MAGA understands what it is that they're talking about. So I think this will end up being a multi-part video, because I think it's important for us to begin to unwrap this a little bit. But I also recognize that most of us would rather be doing anything else. So let me tell you what I know, then I want to point to some creators, and then I want to ask several questions. This series of videos, 2 or 3 videos, however long it ends up being, will have a number of questions that are unanswered at the end. And maybe you can help educate me. Maybe you can help point me to sources. Maybe we can learn about this together. Here's what I know, and please correct me if I get anything wrong. We are stumbling through right now, and we're not getting an accurate portrayal from legacy media at all. Whether that is because they don't understand the context, or whether that's because they are in the pocket of the regime and perpetuating their narrative, those don't have to be mutually exclusive. So Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. The shooter was initially on the loose. There were basically no leads. Immediately, we saw Donald Trump and politicians on the right blame the shooting on the political left. We saw MAGA in an uproar. I don't know if your social media feed was like mine, just screaming MAGA women, blaming liberals for this, just completely this immediate presumption that it must have been somebody on the political left. And again, MAGA politicians were stoking that. Nancy Mace, using really offensive slurs, said it was probably a trans person that did this. With zero information on the shooter when she made that claim multiple times. And then a young, white, cis man, I originally said cis het, but we don't actually know that he's heterosexual, man who is a Mormon from Utah, whose parents and grandmother are registered Republicans, named Tyler Robinson, was arrested. His dad actually turned him in. After we heard screaming threats from people in the MAGA sphere that it must be a Democrat who did this, the young man who was arrested is not a registered Democrat. His family are all MAGA. In fact, his grandmother came out and made a statement where she seemed to be more upset that people might think that her grandson was a liberal Democrat or a radical leftist than the fact that he had been arrested for murdering another human being. Yeah, you heard that right. Tyler's grandma was more upset about the world thinking he might be on the political left than the fact that he killed another person. So that, of course, created a problem. We saw the governor of Utah saying he prayed for 33 hours that the shooter would not be one of his, right? Not be a white Mormon man from a Republican family. The governor of Utah got up and spoke to the press saying he had prayed that it would have been an immigrant. Yeah, because then you could have used it for your political ends. I said in my original video about this, what MAGA really wanted was for it to be like a black trans woman or a Latino immigrant. It's their worst fucking nightmare that this guy's on the political right and that he's a white dude. Then we got this reporting that the bullet casings that were recovered had messages scrawled into them. And of course, the MAGA politicians are going to try and spin that to fit their narrative, right? It's not let's examine the evidence. It's how can we twist the evidence to fit our narrative. So one of the casings said, "Hey, fascist, catch," and then had an up arrow, a right arrow, and 3 down arrow symbols. White Mormon Republican Utah Governor Spencer Cox was desperate for all of us to believe that that phrase, "Hey, fascist, catch," was proof that Tyler must be on the political left. When asked about it, he said, "I think that speaks for itself." Except it doesn't. And this is where we have to talk about 4chan, brain rot, meme culture. Because whether willfully or unintentionally, Governor Cox is misrepresenting the phrases that were on these casings. He either didn't understand what he was reading, because he and whatever bros in law enforcement were as ignorant of this subculture as I was, or he knows better. He's just spinning it to keep his base all whipped up. I'm not going to read what all of the casings said. There are other folks who have talked about this extensively, but one of them said, "If you read this, you're gay, LMAO." This is what I mean. This is like the cringiest shit. I don't know if you had this misunderstanding like I did, but I knew there were different factions on the political right? There is the Christo-fascist Project 2025 set. There are the technocrat oligarchs. So you and I might see Charlie Kirk and his fans as being the far right in American politics. But amongst the right, I think they're seen much more as like moderate. That's the state of the Republican Party now. So the folks to the right of Charlie Kirk, they actually called him a liberal Republican. And even more than that, the groups, the 4chan incel groups to the far right of Charlie Kirk called him a fascist. So when you see the phrase, "Hey, fascist, catch," on that bullet casing, it doesn't mean the same thing to far right internet culture that it means to you and me. That meme culture loves to take phrases, appropriate phrases and terms from other parts of the political landscape and from history, and to use them in an ironic way. What we're seeing here is a failure of mainstream culture and law enforcement to be able to actually read what these messages say and interpret them accurately. This is where I'm just barely starting to learn. And this is where it becomes crucial to understand that it is seeming more and more like Tyler Robinson was part of this group to the right of Charlie Kirk that felt that Charlie Kirk was too liberal. And not only that, they called him a fascist because of his support for Israel. And the folks who are over here, in particular followers of Nick Fuentes, who is a self-declared white supremacist, and his boys who are called the Groypers, who are absolutely opposed to Israel and extremely anti-Semitic, they would call Charlie Kirk and his folks fascists for their support of Israel and AIPAC. And I know I'm going to have to take this into a part 2 here, but this is one of the things I think we need to understand and that I was just made aware of, is that there's the alt-right pipeline, right? Charlie Kirk and Manosphere podcasters and all of those folks have done a really good job of red-pilling young white men in particular, but not exclusively, also trans women, also folks who aren't white, red-pilling them. As they're coming down the alt-right pipeline, they hit Charlie Kirk and he captures them, right? He captures them for his movement, he absorbs them in, he indoctrinates them with his ideology, and that has created this large Christo-fascist subset of the American right. One of the things I think it's important to understand is that Charlie would capture these folks here, but there were all kinds of groups, including Nick Fuentes, who were further right than Charlie, who they want to capture these people, right? And they saw Charlie as an obstacle in their way. He caught these people and he wasn't radical enough for them. They didn't like a lot of his positions and they were resentful of the fact that he would capture these people. He was in their way. They wanted him removed so that these people could come down here and Nick Fuentes could capture them. And that context is really important in understanding what may be going on here. I've got a lot more, so please come back for part 2. Okay, part 2 of the evolving discourse around Tyler Robinson, who is the alleged Charlie Kirk shooter. And in particular, how MAGA Republicans, especially Utah's governor, Donald Trump, Nancy Mace, and others are desperately trying to paint him as somebody on the political left. But the more we are finding out, the more it's becoming really apparent that he may, in fact, be far to the political right of Charlie Kirk and the MAGA movement. So as I said in part 1, this subculture, this kind of 4chan, incel, meme war, groiper subculture is one that I've been really ignorant of until, like the last 48 hours. And so I'm by no means an expert. I would actually like to point to a number of experts in this video who can help us all better understand what may be going on here. You and I are learning about this together, and if I get something wrong, I hope people will correct me in the comments. So a young white cis Mormon male from Utah, from a Trumper Republican family named Tyler Robinson, was arrested for allegedly murdering Charlie Kirk. And despite the fact that more and more of what we learn is indicating that Tyler was not on the political left at all, he definitely was not a registered Democrat, and that as more information comes out, it looks like he may be to the right of Charlie Kirk, which is a devastating blow to the political right in this country, right? Their wet dream was that it would be somebody on the left. It would be an immigrant. It would be, like a Black trans woman. They wanted somebody that they could vilify, somebody that is from one of the groups that they are desperate to target to try and portray to the rest of America as like a threat to white Christian Republicans. So to have it be a white boy from Utah, it's not good for the political narrative of MAGA politicians. And so we're seeing them twist and obfuscate and attempt to still put forth this narrative. They really want MAGA to believe that this guy is the radical left. Donald Trump was still saying that today. And in fact, Utah's white male Mormon governor, Spencer Cox, was still trying to confuse folks. He was still spinning it on, I think, FaceThe Nation today. So here's what he said.
What we know so far, there are a couple things that we can confirm that have been reported. We can confirm that again, according to family and people that we're interviewing, he does come from a conservative family, but his ideology was very different than his family.
His ideology was very different than his family, who are MAGA Republicans. You notice he didn't say Tyler was a radical leftist or Tyler's political ideology was on the left. If they knew that it was on the left, I guarantee you they would be framing it as he's a liberal, he's a leftist. But they're not. They're just saying different than his family, right? It's that intentional obfuscation. It's that intentional framing of the situation to leave out details and yet lead their base to a certain conclusion. The governor went on to say this.
So that's part of it. We do know that the roommate that we had originally talked about, we can confirm that roommate is a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female. So we know that piece. I will say that person has been very cooperative with authorities, and we have additional evidence, forensic evidence that has been processed. We'll be sharing that when charges are filed on Tuesday. So everything that we know confirms that this is the person. The why behind this, again, we're all drawing lots of conclusions and how someone like this could be radicalized. And I think that those are important questions for us to ask and important questions for us to answer.
What a complete departure from the previous talking points from MAGA Republicans, from MAGA politicians, that this guy must be on the political left. Nancy Mace said right out of the gate that she was sure this was a trans person who did this. And do you notice the framing in this interview with the governor of Utah? He had to say that Tyler's roommate is a person who is transitioning. Tyler's roommate didn't shoot Charlie Kirk. Tyler's roommate didn't commit any crimes. But do you see, they've got to tie it to trans folks. And then there is the question as to whether this person actually even is trans. And there definitely is the question as to whether this person was really Tyler's boyfriend or now romantic partner in any way, shape, or form. And we know that the Trump regime during this term has really targeted trans people. They're trying to take away the Second Amendment rights from trans folks. They're trying to disappear trans folks, right, from government documents, from access to government funding, grants to research, trans health, trying to erase trans people in the military. There is an active campaign against trans Americans. So of course, they really want to find some way to connect Tyler to any kind of trans identity whatsoever. But one of the things I'm learning in the last couple of days is that there are both trans women and femboys in alt-right incel culture, the kind of culture, subculture that we are now hearing that Tyler might have been a part of. Those folks who are not necessarily the Nick Fuentes groypers, but that 4chan alt-right culture. And so the fact that his roommate, who may have been his romantic partner, is transitioning, that actually is not an indication of his politics at all. And in fact, people who understand groyper, 4chan, meme rock culture, to them, we are hearing that that is an indication that he may indeed be to the right of Charlie Kirk. And what we are seeing here may be right-on-right violence, right? I've also heard it described as Reich-on-Reich violence. Gang wars amidst the alt-right, however you want to frame it. In particular, I think this is so important to point out because we are seeing MAGA politicians who are trying to incite political violence against trans people in the US. Against anybody on the political left, but in particular against trans folks. This rhetoric is extremely dangerous. This risks people's lives. They are so anxious to make sure that they obfuscate, that they hide the fact that this kid may have been hard, black-pilled alt-right, that they are willing to wrongly, there would never be a situation in which it was right, but they are willing to try and put targets on the backs of trans people in this country. It's beyond irresponsible. It's unconscionable. So I want to point to a couple of creators who can speak more authoritatively on this issue than me, because again, I'm learning about all of this. So again, we don't know yet whether Tyler was definitively part of Nick Fuentes' groyper subculture that had beef with Charlie Kirk and his folks. But signs are pointing that way, and we are seeing the press not wanting to talk about it, especially corporate legacy media. And I understand this is really confusing, where you're looking at a 4chan incel subculture that uses jokes and memes in ironic and mocking ways, so that it's really difficult if you don't have a shared vocabulary, if you don't have a shared understanding of their subculture, it's difficult to interpret what they are putting out, including the messages scrawled into the bullet casings, and including the kind of conflict that they had, between these various groups on the right. So I want to point you to a couple of creators whose content you should go watch. So the first is Canterel. I think Cy has some of the best and most thoughtful content on the internet, hands down. This video currently at the top of their TikTok. It looks like this. It's called Blackpill Aesthetics. You should go watch it. The second person is RoteRote Media. Also very informative content on this portion of the alt-right. The third person whose content I stumbled upon for the first time today is JAXX. And they have a couple of videos specifically about groyper subculture and femboys that might help you understand the things that are being said about Tyler and Tyler's roommate / partner. Let me just share a little clip here.
To have a feminine boyfriend that strengthens the groyper speculations. They are obsessed with femboys. Oh man, the chronically online wokeness is paying off. There exists a subsection of incels who are so celibate and hateful and fearful of women that they groom other incels into feminizing themselves for the sake of the cause. They call themselves operators and cosplay as characters like Ghost from Call of Duty and other very, very militarized characters in gear just to take that gear off and then be an all ooh or oh whoa, hey, look at that. To be more specific, because I know a lot of you are actually looking for information, they wear military cosplays, but underneath those cosplays are like lingerie and knee-high socks. There's even a subsection of femcel who does the same thing, and the groypers hate them. Just now finding out that there exists a whole subsection of alt-right that genuinely views MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement, as liberal. And you're not even in the pipeline yet. You're looking at it from way far away.
Please understand that MAGA politicians are desperately trying to spin this to create conflict, dangerous conflict between centrists and the left versus all of MAGA. They're desperate to make this a political civil war, to get their base completely spun up. If Donald Trump can get MAGA to enact violence, then he doesn't need the National Guard, where he's failing miserably, to try to chill dissent, to try to intimidate and scare people. This is what is known as stochastic terrorism, where you are not committing any violence, but your rhetoric low-key encourages other people. So please be aware, the way this story is currently being reported by politicians, by legacy media, is not accurate. Whether that's because they lack the cultural context, they are too ignorant to speak on this, or whether it's intentional. Either way, it's extremely dangerous. Okay, part 3 about how the more we are finding out about Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, the more we are all having to educate ourselves about the alt-right, incel, 4chan, groyper, brain rot, meme war, subculture. And that really fucking sucks. I, 1, wished I didn't know that these people exist. And 2, am embarrassed that I underestimated how extreme the alt-right in the United States can get. This subculture on the far right that is, I think, largely driven by Nick Fuentes, but also by others, they saw Charlie Kirk as a moderate, as a liberal. And the more we are finding out about Tyler Robinson, it seems like he may be part of that subculture. The only threats that I know of that I've read about against Charlie Kirk when he was alive came from folks, oh, my dogs are barking, hang on. Came from folks in like 2022, 2023 who were politically to the right of Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk. They were part of this incel, 4chan, Nick Fuentes subculture. I've seen a number of people on social media today calling that right on right crime, Reich on Reich crime, gang violence on the right. We have these different factions in the political right that I think those of us who are over here on the left, we may have been ignorant of if we are not really chronically online. I do have to say that my adult children and my older teenager, they were well aware of all of this stuff. And maybe I want to talk about that in the next video or future video, because I've seen a number of parents online who are real freaked out by this, how easy it was for these young men to get radicalized, for the alt-right, like where Charlie Kirk is considered a liberal, a moderate, where folks way over here call Charlie Kirk a fascist because he's pro-Israel and they're like straight up Yazis, where they're like American isolationists, and they thought that Charlie Kirk was sucking up their potential followers and they saw him as an obstacle in the way along the alt-right pipeline. Charlie Kirk was in the way of these young men going all the way down here to the Nick Fuentes side of the alt-right. In my last video, I talked about a couple of creators on TikTok that I think have really nuanced takes and know a lot more than I do. I am just now learning about all of this, and my kids are like, Mom, how could you be so ignorant? I don't know, y'all. It's not a subculture that I've really cared to understand or even had any idea was there. And I think that's true for most Americans, even probably most MAGA Americans. We are still seeing right-wing media desperately trying to spin this as the shooter must be a radical leftist. That's what Donald Trump has said. That's what the governor of Utah and a number of other right-wing politicians have said. He's a radical leftist before they knew a single damn thing about Tyler Robinson, who, again, alleged, innocent until proven guilty. Before they knew a single thing about that man, they were screaming, trying to whip up their base into a violent frenzy, declaring that it must be folks on the left, right? We saw social media inundated with posts from angry MAGA. Lots of them have taken those posts down in the last day as more information comes out about Tyler. You know, a young, white, cis man who is a Mormon from Utah, whose parents are big-time Trumper Republicans, who was never a registered Democrat, and who left messages that align with this Nick Fuentes groyper far-right culture. We're still seeing the Fox News crowd, and not just Fox News, y'all. We're seeing more mainstream, but still in the pocket of the regime media who's spinning this as like these messages that were carved into the bullet casings are an indication that this guy must be on the left, because they don't understand the subculture. They can't read the language. They can't interpret what they're reading accurately. And I think most Americans can't. Most of us have been oblivious to all of this. I do find it interesting. My first 2 videos about this are getting a lot of bot comments insisting that this alleged shooter, Tyler, is on the far left, saying, oh, he had a trans girlfriend. That's proof that he's on the far left. My last video, I talked about how actually the fact that he may have had a femboy partner is probably, it's evidence to the fact that he may be part of this groyper subculture. But the bots are really working overtime. Either that or MAGA, who has just had their brain pumped full of, you know, talking points from Fox News, they're happily regurgitating it still on social media, because I think it's going to be really difficult for them to accept that the person that may have done this is not of the political persuasion that they had hoped for. In fact, the governor of Utah said that he prayed for 33 hours that the shooter would not be one of us, meaning a white Mormon man from Utah. And that's exactly what they got. They got a white Mormon man from Utah with family who are all Trumpers, who had in the past supported Donald Trump. And we have heard the governor of Utah say today that his family said he had been radicalized to a different political ideology than them. So he's no longer like the Christo-fascist Charlie Kirk MAGA. He is somewhere else, but the governor did not say, oh, he's far left. He just said he'd been radicalized differently. If he was on the left, the governor would have said it definitively. The fact that he omitted that information, I think, speaks volumes. So I think for your average American, we don't know enough yet. I am learning. It's a steep learning curve. And it's really, frankly, depressing how many Gen Z men have been radicalized. And I have some questions. I don't know enough yet. I don't have a good enough conceptualization, and I'm trying to listen to creators who have a lot of experience here, folks who did get what's called blackpilled, right? Not red-pilled like Charlie Kirk, but blackpilled to this far right portion of the internet. I'm trying to listen to folks who have deconstructed from that, who have come out from that. I'm trying to listen to folks who are experts in this area, and I really encourage you to do that as well. Seek out people who can speak authoritatively, definitively, and accurately on this issue. And if you hear me get something wrong, please correct me, because again, I'm learning right alongside you. I have a couple of questions here in particular, things that I'm trying to understand about this. So if you can help me out in the comments, please do so. What it sounds like, depending on what part of social media you're on, is that there is this kind of conflict, this kind of almost civil war over here. These warring factions that are trying to seize control and are trying to capture the most amount of people that are being radicalized on the alt-right pipeline. So we know that, something 25, 30% of Americans may be MAGA, may really identify with Charlie Kirk. I've seen people all over social media profoundly upset that their favorite celebrities were following Charlie Kirk, are posting about how he had good ideas, right? Like Kristen Chenoweth and Selma Blair. Nobody should be surprised at Selma Blair. I think it can be shocking for those of us who may be on the left, liberal, centrist, to see how many celebrities really thought that Charlie Kirk was pretty moderate, because I think we may see that ideology as very extreme, but in the American political discourse, I think it's hard to ignore the fact that it's very normalized. So we have this large group of folks who probably align with Charlie Kirk, probably think that the racism and violent rhetoric that he spewed is not unreasonable. Again, people who should not surprise you, the Gwen Stefanis, the Chris Pratts. But then you have these folks far to the right, often self-declared white nationalists, isolationists. They want an even more extreme right version. They don't think that Charlie Kirk and MAGA go far enough, and they want to seize control, and they want to be able to capture those people on the alt-right pipeline. What I don't understand yet is that we have a quantifiable amount of MAGA. How many people are over here to the right? How many Groypers, Nick Fuentes followers are there actually? How many of these young men in our country, it's not just young men, there's also trans women, there's also, cis women. How many folks are in this extreme far right movement? A very loud vocal presence online does not equate to a large population of people in the real world. Anybody on social media is aware that people who are real loud online, they may be a very small fringe component in real life. But I just don't have a good idea of how big is this subculture? How much of a threat are they? Right, the Groypers have been trying to undermine Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA for years. How successful is that effort going to be? Are we now going to see, a big dramatic gang war on the far right? And this is my other big question. Maybe y'all can help me with this one. This is my really big question about this. As more information comes out, and if Tyler Robinson does actually prove to be a member of one of these far right incel 4chan groups, maybe the Groypers, maybe another one, will MAGA Republicans be able to absorb that truth, or will they be committed to their false narrative that he must be a leftist? Because that gives them an enemy that is desirable for them, right? That justifies the kind of violence that they want to enact against their friends and family and neighbors who are politically further left than them. I asked that question of one of my friends who's an expert in this area today, and their response was, Who is MAGA's trusted messenger that will tell them the truth around this issue? That is an excellent question. If all of this comes out and it goes the way it looks like it's going to go, will anybody on MAGA that they trust communicate that truth to them? Or will they be committed to their narrative that currently allows them to dehumanize and commit violence against centrists and liberals and leftists? Welcome to Post-Truth Politics. As more and more information comes out about Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, and how he may be from the far, far right of incel, 4chan, meme war, internet subculture, a lot of parents on social media are really having a hard time today. I think a lot of us in the last 48 hours are learning that our teenage and young adult children know an awful lot about a far-right subculture that we were completely oblivious to until very, very recently. And that is really scary for a lot of parents. And I want to talk about it for a minute. As the parent of 4 children, ages 14 up to 22, we are an unschooling family. My kids have had pretty much unfettered access to the internet for a real long time. I think I have some perspective to share here. First, let me give you an example of what parents are saying on social media today.
I didn't know what a groper was until this morning. Did my son understand the memes? Did he know what the Blackpill was? Yeah. I'd never heard those things before. I didn't know what they meant, but my son did. My son did. My son understood. Internet is cut off in my home. We're done. We're done. This is done. We're done. We're done.
First off, I completely empathize with this parent because it's really scary to see how many young Gen Z men have gotten red-pilled and black-pilled. At the beginning of that video, she said, I didn't know what a groper was until today, but my son knew. That's precisely the situation that I'm in. I knew who Nick Fuentes was. I didn't really know how far to the right some of these incel groups are from Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. These folks they're way over there. But my 3 eldest children knew, 17, 20, and 22. They knew all about it. I have been getting schooled by them. Not just about Nick Fuentes' group, the Groypers, but also about the kind of language and ironic use of different phrases, the kind of meme culture that exists in the 4chan incel sphere, the black pill sphere. It is a little shocking to find out that my kids knew so much about this, but also not like as unschoolers. My kids, again, pretty free reign of the internet, and they are very well versed in many, many subjects I'm extremely ignorant of. But I specifically want to address something that this mom said, and I'm not judging her. I'm not in any way criticizing her decision to get rid of the internet. I just want to share my perspective as somebody who has never limited internet access for my children. Now, for transparency's sake, we have had lots of conversations with our kids throughout the years, like, how many hours did you spend online today? How many hours did you spend doom scrolling or video gaming? And what do you think about that in terms of balance with the rest of your life, right? My goal is not for me to set arbitrary limits on my children. It's for me to help my children cultivate their own sense of self-discipline, their own boundaries, their own limits, and be able to moderate and be able to accurately control different aspects of their own lives. I want them to be in charge of their own lives. I want them to learn to regulate. I don't want to exert external control over them. So there definitely have been conversations like, hey, my dude, I feel like this is a lot of hours online today. How are you feeling about that? Do you think we should set a limit? Are you having trouble getting off the internet yourself? Would you like me to set a timer? Do you need someone in the family to help enforce a limit for you if you don't have the self-control to do it yourself? I mean, there are times I'll give my phone to one of my kids and be like, go hide this for a while, because I can't control myself, and it's okay to ask for support. But this mom is real freaked out because she sees the potential for her teenager to get red-pilled, right? To get black-pilled, to go all the way down the alt-right pipeline. And I want to tell you a couple of stories. So my 17-year-old talked to me about this. You know, he was first learning to use YouTube. He's a real big history buff, so he would love to watch not just like history deep dives, but also movie reviews of period pieces. And also he got really into BreadTube and, you know, like H-Bomber Guy and Folding Ideas. And when he was 13, 14, he came to me and said, I think I'm about one step away from getting sucked down the alt-right pipeline. Not that he would get sucked down it, but he clicked on one video. I don't know the context. He was probably learning about World War II or something. And he did the next video that was like a recommended. He clicked on it and suddenly the algorithm began to change. Very 1, 2, 3 clicks. And bam, the content you're being shown on YouTube shifts dramatically to the far right. Suddenly you're seeing Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and PragerU and, then it just goes farther and farther. And similarly, if you have an adolescent child who likes to watch YouTubes of other people playing video games and then also likes to go play video games online with strangers, especially first-person shooter games, I'm telling y'all, that will really quickly transition your kid's algorithm to pretty hard alt-right content. My choice then was not to ban my 14-year-old from the internet. It was, let's have a conversation about this. He recognized the algorithm is trying to radicalize me to the alt-right. So this is where my unschooling position comes in, because I want my kids to learn to navigate that, to recognize that the system or someone with an agenda is trying to propagandize them, is trying to radicalize them, is trying to brainwash them, and then figure out how they deal with it. I want my kids to learn to regulate. I want them to learn to have discernment about what's happening. I don't mean that in like the evangelical sense. I mean it like I want them to be able to comprehend the way that other people or other organizations have an agenda, and that there is propaganda, there is messaging that is meant to persuade you, to influence you, right? Now, like influencers, to recognize not just the biases, but the end goals, and then figure out how you navigate that. Again, no hate to this mom for wanting to take away all of the internet from her son. I understand that sometimes that may be necessary if someone is trying to brainwash and radicalize your kid. Speaking as somebody who has lost friends down the QAnon pipeline, and they're long gone, y'all. They are gone. That is a very, very dangerous thing. To know that your child is being exposed to that kind of content is something that's very scary for a parent. And you want to protect your child from getting sucked down that pipeline, right? Like, we're looking at a young, white Mormon from Utah, Republican family. He went to college for a term, squeaky clean, and allegedly he killed Charlie Kirk. And it is looking more and more like he might have been sucked way down that alt-right pipeline. Now, his family was diehard MAGA, right? So he was already starting pretty far down the pipeline, but it looks like he may have gotten radicalized even further right, to a place where he thought that Charlie Kirk was a liberal and even a fascist for his support of Israel. Again, we don't know all the details yet, but more and more is coming out. So I guess from my perspective, I want my kids to be able to navigate these scenarios. I want them to know how to work through this, how to protect themselves, and not rely on mom as an external force. I also want to have non-judgmental, open communication with my children. If they see something on the internet, they can come talk to me about it. I won't freak out. I know that I can have a conversation with them and we can kind of break it down and say, what do you think is really happening here? What is the goal of the person making this content? What do you think they're trying to convince you of? What do you think they actually want to have happen? How do you feel? How do you feel in your body? What are your emotions? What are you thinking about when you're watching this? What do you think you should do if you are aware on some level that this is an attempt to radicalize you? What do you think the next step should be? Should you block this channel? Should you try to reset your algorithm by searching up a bunch of other terms, watching a number of videos intentionally about different content? Do you think you want to take a break from the social media platform right now? Let's talk through some options. I think this is what parenting is for teens and young adults, because parenting relationships don't end just when your kid turns 18. I think this is what it means to parent our kids in this day and age, unfortunately. We have to be open to having conversations, to watching that content with our kids if they are currently absorbing it, and then to facilitating, what does it look like to navigate this? What does it look like to protect yourself? Do you hear the propaganda? Do you hear how dangerous this messaging is? What do you think is going on? What do you think would be the best way to work through this? What happens if your friends are starting to talk like this or directing you to websites? What do you think about groyper culture? What do you think about the fact that so many people in your age bracket find this information persuasive and compelling? I think for me, this is what it means to parent. This is what it means to help our kids get through this period in history, and also to make sure that they develop the skills and the insight to be able to continually navigate situations throughout their lives where somebody may have an agenda, somebody may be trying to radicalize them, to influence them. So what do you think? How would you respond if your kid said they knew everything about Groyper culture and this is the first that you're hearing about it?